all of a sudden I realize where I am, and I look down, and the coals are laid out on that grass. They're glowing bright red. You can feel the heat coming off of this thing. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
And I'm freaking. My heart is about ready to jump out of my chest.
When we think about experiences that change our lives, most of us probably think of moving to a different city, starting a new career, getting married, having a baby, things like that. How about walking on hot coals that are over 1,000 degrees? My guest today, Dave Albin, says firewalking is a truly life-changing experience. Dave worked for Tony Robbins for many years, in security and as a member of the Firewalk team, eventually becoming the head of Firewalks as the fire captain. In 2014, Dave ventured out on his own. He now runs Firewalk Adventures, where he uses fear-based elements like glasswalking, firewalking, board breaking, arrow breaking, and fire eating to show people what is really possible in life. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Elizabeth. It's great to be here.
You do some incredible things that frankly kind of scare me. But sounds like I should probably undertake. Can you first describe what some of these things are? Let's start with just the firewalking. I mean, are you just literally taking someone and walking with bare feet over hot coals? Is it as simple as that?
It is. Well, let me talk about a Tony Robbins seminar.
Okay.
So what we would do is we'd start the fire around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we would burn it all day, 9 to 10 hours. We keep feeding hardwood to that, seasoned hardwood. It renders at the end of the night. And so the coals just keep dropping and dropping and dropping. And then 9, 10 hours later, you have this beautiful giant pile of the prettiest coals you've ever seen. I like to call it the blue flame because it's so hot at that point that it's just a beautiful fire. So we load those coals into a wheelbarrow, and then we put the wheelbarrow in between 2 lanes of sod, of grass. And each fire lane is approximately 3 feet wide and approximately 18 feet long. And then what we do...
That's longer than I expected to have to get across.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a short one. We do some that are much longer, but 18 feet long, yeah. And then we take a shovel and we sprinkle the coals on top of that grass, and then we pat them down, and then that's what the participants walk on. So from a Tony Robbins seminar standpoint, we're talking thousands of people. On the short side, we had a couple thousand people, 2,000, maybe 3,000. On the large side, the largest firewalk we've ever done with Tony Robbins I did was in London in 2005. We literally walked 12,300 people, which I will say is a world record. Now, I want to disclose that Guinness was not there. We didn't invite them for that matter. But to my knowledge, Elizabeth, there's never been a firewalk anywhere close to 12,300 people.
And the coals stayed hot for that many people? You're having to refresh them.
Yeah, you refresh them. So you let 3, 4, maybe 5 people walk, something like that. And then you'll hear Tony in the background through the PA system going, fresh coals, fresh coals.
Oh my
so
gosh.
we shovel them, and it's pretty cool. In fact, if you want to see something really funny that really depicts what somebody goes through in a firewalk, go Google Oprah's Firewalk. And you'll see at the moment, when it was Oprah's turn to walk, Tony goes, fresh coals.
She was at that event?
She did a firewalk in 2010 at the LA Convention Center.
Okay.
And so my assistant captain was manning the lane that evening, and so he laid the coals for her. But the beautiful thing about watching her is that she's freaking out. And, you know, everybody's going to go through their fight and flight on this, because firewalking is I call it a come to Jesus meeting, if you will, because when it's your turn, guess what? It's your turn.
Yeah.
So
the adrenaline is pumping. I'm sure.
Absolutely. And you know, you're going through all these questions in your mind. Why am I doing this?
Of course.
Metaphorically, what's going on here? Why would I need to do this? This is the same emotions that you feel when you're going through any fear breakthrough. I don't care what it is, whether you jump out of a plane, whether you zip line or bungee jump or ask that girl to the dance or have children or get married or start a business, right? It's pretty much all the same thing. And That's exactly why Tony uses the Firewalk on day one of a 4-day event. The reason he does it on day one is to get leverage on you, because he knows it's a very powerful experience. He knows there's a huge paradigm shift, involved here. And he also knows that once he gets you across the fire, the new question now becomes, well, if I can walk on coals that are 1,000 degrees and not burn myself and hurt myself, what else can I do?
Yeah, it's very empowering, I'm sure, if you can get through that. What is physically happening, though? How can you do it on your bare feet to get across 1,000? It doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't. And you know what? And I'm going to be very candid. I don't have a clue. I have no idea.
And you're the expert. I love the honesty.
I'm the expert, right? I've walked hundreds of thousands of people, literally. And my hallucination is that when you're in a powerful state like that, your body's kicking out all kinds of chemicals. So there's fight or flight. So it knows how to protect you. We all know that. We've all heard the stories about superhuman strength, right? A car flips over on a child, and the mother, next thing you know, she's lifting the car off the child.
Sure.
So I think there's something to do along that line. There's a lot of energy that comes out of our feet and our hands. And so I think that maybe that energy kind of pushes back, if you will. But, the bottom line is the coals are 1,000 degrees. Can you get burnt? Yes. Are you going to get burnt to the point where you're going to need hospitalization? No. Can you get a little kiss? I call them little badges of honor. Because at the end of the day, there's a point where Oprah's freaking out. And Tony basically interrupts her pattern. And he says, hey, Oprah, hey, come on. What's the worst that can happen here? Burn your feet off and die? I mean, come on. And it's true, right? He really reduced it to the ridiculous.
Wow.
And that's what we do. We tell ourselves things that are just not true. And we have to be careful with that.
We really go to not just the worst case scenario, we go to beyond what could possibly happen to take ourselves out of taking chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so I've learned over the years of doing this, 3 decades at the helm here, the fears that we don't overcome become our limits. Because if you use fear not to firewalk, if you came to an event and you knew there was going to be a firewalk and you don't do it and you allow fear to overrun you and make your decision for you, fear's not done with you. Mm-hmm. It's going to continue to take things from you. Because at the end of the day, fear's a liar, right? Fear will tell you all kinds of things that are just not true. Now, don't misinterpret that. Fear's there to make sure that we don't do stupid things. It's there to keep us alive. But here's what I tell people. Fear's there to guide you. Just don't let it become your jailer.
Yeah, I think it really can build one way or the other. You can get the confidence to take risks and do things, or you can build that narrative about yourself that I can only do these many things. Like I growing up thought that I was not that much of a risk taker. And at the last minute, I decided to go to a college across the country. I was going to go to a college very close to home. And that simple act gave me so much confidence that then I could do other things. And I ended up moving to 9 different cities in my 20s and my early 30s, doing things I never thought I would do, simply because I took that one first big act and proved to myself I actually can take risks.
Yep, you sure can. And those risks can be calculated too, right? Mm-hmm. And again, this is where brutal honesty comes in. What's really happening here? What's the worst case scenario? And if I'm being just totally honest with myself, Firewalk, when I did my first one back in 1995, I had a friend of mine call me on the phone and tell me Tony was coming to town. And I said, yeah, great, let's go. And he said, cool, I'll make the arrangements. And what they told us to do is drink a lot of water, make sure you're nice and hydrated.
Okay.
Bring snacks because you're going to spend a lot of time in the room. Ha! Oh, are you kidding me? What an understatement that was. And then he said, bring a good attitude and be ready to play full out. And I said, Dan, how much was the ticket? He said, $700. I go, so I owe you $700. Don't you worry. I'll play full out. And what's interesting about that, just as he was getting ready to get off the phone, he goes, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Hey, I forgot to tell you something. We're going to be doing a firewalk. And I remember thinking,
oh, my goodness.
Well, maybe you are, pal, but I'm sure not going to.
I'm paying for this?
Yeah, right. I'm paying $700 to go burn my feet off? Yeah, right. But I remember making a decision on the spot. I'm not going to do it. And the interesting part about that is I didn't even know what a firewalk was. I had no idea. I had no references. But I was saying no to something, right, automatically. And so that was a huge life lesson for me. So when I got there, I resisted. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. Well, heck, we get to the event, right? And Tony takes the stage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the next thing I know, it's after midnight. 10 hours we've been in a room, 3,500 people. And it's after midnight. All of a sudden, Tony goes, take your shoes off. And I remember thinking, oh, no, pal. You're not tricking me. I don't think so. And then it dawns on me, though. I see everybody else, Elizabeth, they're taking their shoes off, right? So now I'm in a real interesting situation. Because if I don't take my shoes off and go out there with my shoes on, all these people are going to know I'm a coward.
Peer pressure.
So we can't have that, right? So I went, well, okay, I'll take my shoes off, but I know I don't have to do it. And so that's what I did. And so now you get out there, well, my gosh, because he's got everybody going out there. He's got them all chanting. He's got them clamping and chanting at the same time, going, yes, yes, yes. So now you've got 3,500 people chanting. And then as soon as you get outside into the parking lot where the Firewalk is, he's got African drummers.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's very ceremonial now.
It really builds.
Oh, my gosh. It's intense. It's like, dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
And you're walking out there and, the vibrational part of this is crazy. Well, like I said earlier, he's got a giant fire building over there. It's been burning all day. They probably have about 20 fire lanes ready to go. Well, I'm not doing it. So what do? I go hide in the back.
Sure, yeah, you go find a corner somewhere.
Sure, nobody's going to know.
No.
Right? Nah, not so much. Because here's what Tony realizes. He knows this is going to be one of the most life-changing experiences ever. The paradigm shift on this is massive. And so he doesn't want you to miss out on that experience. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't walk, you don't walk. So what? Who cares? But he doesn't want that to happen because the change comes as you break through the fear. So he trains people to go find the cowards. So literally, I'm back there hiding, and next thing I know, here comes this guy. And he makes eye contact with me. And he doesn't take his eyes off me. And he gets about 20 feet from me, kind of leans into me and gives me kind of a strange look as though, are you okay? And when we're not, what do we say?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. We're good here. No problem here, man. You can be on your way.
You build that wall.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so he says, oh, great. Are you going to walk tonight? And I'm like, didn't you get the memo, pal? I'm like, absolutely not. No, I'm not going to firewalk tonight. And he goes, hey, man, that's cool. He said, don't worry. We don't want you to do anything you don't want to do. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, took the pressure off. I like this guy. He's going to get me out of here. By the way, I don't know this guy to this day. I wish I did, because I wouldn't be sitting here on your podcast, Elizabeth, if it wasn't for him. And he said, well, wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I thought, well, yeah, that should be interesting. Yeah, let's go watch these people burn their feet off. Let's do that.
Let's go watch the dumb ones.
Let's go watch these idiots, okay? And he says, well, listen, you can't see anything from where you are, which is true. I'm 100 yards away. I can't see anything. I can see the big fire over there. It's burning. Everybody's chanting, yes, yes, and the drums are dun, dun, dun. But I can't see anything. I got 3,500 people standing in front of me. And he says, well, just get in line, and eventually you'll get up there. Right? All right. Well, in his defense, he's telling the truth. So I get in line, and I'm just kind of walking along. I can't see anything. It's just a wall of people. And I'm kind of walking along, and all of a sudden this guy comes up, and he whispers in my ear. And he says, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And then, pew, he just disappeared into the night. And I'm like, what was that? Who was that guy? Where did he come from? And so I'm kind of walking along, and all of a sudden I get to a point. I still can't see in front of me, but now I can see at an angle. And Elizabeth, they're doing it. They're firewalking. Every race, every creed, every color, they're firewalking. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This is insane. Why are they doing this? Metaphorically, what's happening here? What's the reasoning behind this? I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I'm kind of staring now. I'm in a zone now, right? I'm completely in a trance, staring at these people over here, firewalking, and I'm not paying attention to what's in front of me. And the next thing I know, guess where I am?
At the front?
I'm at the front of the line.
Oh, man.
Just like that. And all of a sudden I realize where I am, and I look down, and the coals are laid out on that grass. They're glowing bright red. You can feel the heat coming off of this thing. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
And I'm freaking. My heart is about ready to jump out of my chest. Well, There's a trainer standing there. And all of a sudden the trainer goes, eyes up. And it like startled me. I bring my head up, right? Well, apparently I'm a slow learner. I'm in a room with Tony for 10 hours. Guess what he tells you to do? Keep your head up. Don't stare at what you fear. Look to the celebration end. That's where the reward is. That's where the change is going to happen. And so now my eyes are up. And the trainer goes, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, stronger. And I went, yes. And then he got in my face. He could tell I wasn't in a peak state. He could tell I was leaving a lot on the table. And he screamed at me, stronger.
Oh, my goodness.
And now I'm kind of like angry. And I threw my hands in the air and I screamed at the top of my lungs, yes. And the trainer goes, go, go, go. I took off.
You did it.
I did it. Well, here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. When you take that first step, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth.
You're not stopping.
You're not stopping. Well, they position two people at the end of the fire lane, and they grab hands, and they stop you. And they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so now I'm wiping my feet, and I'm looking back, and I'm celebrating, and I'm going, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not doing this. And all of a sudden, I realize I burnt myself really, really bad. And I lift up my left foot, and I look at it, and it's dirty, but there's no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. It must be my right foot. I look at it. It's dirty. There's no burns. So I've got ghost pains is what's going on. Wow. And so now I'm freaked out. I'm like, I just walked on hot coals that are 1,000 degrees. I didn't burn myself. And this may sound like I'm a total idiot, but I had no idea how I did it.
Yeah.
Have you ever done something like that? Where you do something really, really cool and it's really awesome and you go, I don't know how I did it. I just
kind of
did
like
it.
People who are really afraid to do public speaking, but you have to give that speech and you walk off the stage and you think, was I even there? Was
Great
I
example.
even on that stage?
Yeah.
It was like an out-of-body experience.
Exactly. Great example.
Wow.
And so now I felt exhilarated. I could conquer the world. Well, I'm feeling the same thing 3,500 people are feeling. This is extraordinary. Unbelievable experience. Well, here's where it gets really, really interesting. The next day, because this is a 4-day event, that's day one. So he firewalks you that night to get the leverage on you. So when you come in for day 2, you've got a different attitude, you've got a different belief system, you've got a different level of consciousness, your self-worth, self-confidence, self-belief is much higher now. And so you're standing in the foyer getting ready to go into the venue with 3,500 people that all shared something the night before that's unlike anything you could ever share with each other unless it was a near-death experience. Because here's what I'm witnessing. People are hugging. They're laughing. They're crying. They're sharing their story emotionally. I had never seen or witnessed anything like this in my life. And to this day, I've never seen or witnessed anything like it anywhere in the world unless you're at a Tony Robbins seminar and you do the firewalk the night before.
Because you know what? You were not the only one who was determined not to do it. There were
right.
Many hundreds, if not thousands of others who said, I'm not doing that, and then did. So that arc of what people overcame was enormous.
Yeah. When you can connect with other people like that, when you share that powerful of an experience, you're in the moment. You are right now in the moment. You're not thinking about the past or the future. That morning, what I saw from people is, again, they were very much in the now. And that's what got me. That was one of the most life-changing experiences of my life last night. And I'll admit, I didn't wash my feet when I went to bed that night. I'm like,
you wanted to keep feeling it?
I'm like, let's keep them dirty for a few days just to kind of show myself that I actually did this.
Then shortly after that, did you then go to work for Tony?
Well, at the seminar, I found out that Tony uses about 300 volunteers for an event that size. Well, about 50 or 60 of them work outside all day building the fire, which is called the fire building team. And so one of Tony's trainers I got to know, he said, hey, if you want to be involved, you call Robbins Research in San Diego, and they'll send you an application, and then you fill it out, and then you send it back in. And so I did. And I got a letter back in the mail after I did that, said, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins organizations in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And the next thing I know, guess what? I'm on the fire building team, and because I had a military and a security background, they put me on the security detail to help take care of some of Tony's celebrities. So that happened in late 95 after I attended the Firewalk. By the time I got to 96, they hired me as a subcontractor on the security team. And then they also put me in as the assistant fire captain in 96. And then to fast forward in 2003, Tony offered me the fire captain's position, which meant that I took over all of his firewalks globally.
So you're just traveling with him to all the...
Taking care of all his firewalks. And because I also did security, I also came to some of the events that he did where there wasn't a firewalk involved. And he even paid for my family to travel, because when I first got offered the position, I was declining it because I said, I homeschool my kids. I can't do that. And they said, well, what if we pay to have your kids travel with us? Will that make a difference? When it did. So my kids at the age of 6 and 9 are now on the road with their dad and their mom, homeschooling on the road with Tony Robbins.
With Tony. Oh my gosh, what an education.
Yeah, I couldn't have paid $1 million for that type of education. I just couldn't have done it. In fact,
that's amazing.
When I told the kids that we were going to go on the road, my son's like, so Dad, where's our first event? I said, Sydney, Australia. So that's how their career started. The first time they ever firewalked, my daughter was 6 and my son was 9 years old.
How did they react?
Oh, it was beautiful. They're kids. They don't have the fears that adults do. They walked across those coals like it wasn't nothing. We were in New York. Tony knew that my kids were there and going to walk. He was really excited about that. My daughter came up and Tony took her by the hand. I took her by the hand and we walked her. And then my son stepped up after my daughter walked, and Tony looked at him and said, I love you and I love your daddy. Go!
Oh, how sweet.
It was magical, Elizabeth. You can't even imagine as a parent and their mom there to witness that and be part of that was absolutely incredible. And then in 2014, my life took another twist. I'm driving down the road one day and this company called Google called me and wanted me.
What company is this?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So they reached out to me to see if I was the Dave Albin that had done the firewalks for Tony Robbins. I'm like, yeah, of course. What can I do for you? And they said, well, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you. And I went, okay. When? Well, are you under any contractual or legal contract, a non-compete? I'm like, nope. Homeboy's a free agent. He can do whatever he wants. So the next thing I know, I found myself in Mountain View on stage in front of 148 Google executives, and we ended up doing the glasswalk experience. The reason we did the glasswalk is that logistically the firewalk wasn't going to work for them, but they still wanted a powerful experience. So I teach them how to walk on broken glass.
Can you describe that? Is that, again, just what it sounds like? Just shards of glass? Just walking on it?
You betcha.
How does that compare to the firewalking in terms of
Some people, it scares them a lot more
Hmm.
because, they've been cut at some point. If you've ever been cut by a piece of glass, then you can have an entirely different experience with that. In fact, I've had many of the firewalkers that have worked with me at the Tony Robbins events tell me, firewalking I'm good with, but this glasswalking thing scares the hell out of me. They've got all kinds of fright. We do the glasswalk because not all my clients logistically can do the firewalk. So when the firewalk's not possible, we have a great backup for them. And one of those experiences is the glasswalk.
And what is the thought process behind, say, the Google executive team or any of these organizations, people who hire you? Why would they say, hey, let's do these fear-based activities? What are they trying to get out of it?
Because what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. That's the core answer. That's it. You can put really great speakers on stage and they can talk all day, but that doesn't mean that it's going to change the people sitting in the audience. You've got to get them up. You've got to get them to do something. You've got to get them to step through their fears. And so when you...
Literally stepping through your fears.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. We've proven it this time and time again. That's why Robbins used it. He knows. He studied it intensely. He knew he had to create a powerful experience to get them to leverage on themselves. Corporate America knows that. Most CEOs get it. They know how professional athletes get. How do you become a pro? How do you get to the Olympics? How do you do that? You've got to have a mindset that will get you there. Every CEO out there has a very daunting task. He has to keep his people inspired and motivated. How do you do that? Well, you can take them golfing, but they hate that because Charlie wins it every year because he's the best golfer in the company, right? So that doesn't work. You can do all kinds of
fancy dinners, and you can play blackjack, and you can have scavenger hunts, and you can do all kinds of cool stuff.
but nothing will create a bonding experience like a firewalk. And the evidence of that I knew is that next day when I came into the seminar and I was standing there in that foyer with all those people going, you've got to be kidding me. Look at this. This is unbelievable. So if you want to build a powerful culture, CEOs get it. And so that's why they hire us to come in. Now, the other thing I do too is I create the board break experience with the firewalk. So that makes it a double whammy. So I basically teach them a martial arts move and they break the board with their bare hands. Now, I have a proprietary setup for that. I have them write some things on the front of the board. I have them write some things on the back of the board. I have
like a fear that you want to break
right,
through?
Yeah. You know, if you write something on the board you want to move towards, write something on the back of the board you need to move away from. Add anybody's name to the board that you're in conflict with. If you're out of sorts with somebody, you're angry or you've got resentments or whatever, put their name on the board. It ends tonight, period. Why do you want to drag that around with you in your life? And then the other thing, I have them write anybody's name on that board that they've lost. So they break the board, we go outside, they do the firewalk, they throw the board into the fire. So if there's another more powerful experience out there to cause change, let me know. Because I just don't think there is. So when a company hires me now, I can do the firewalk however we want. We don't have to do it like Tony Robbins. The Cherokee Indians don't firewalk that way. The Tahitians don't do it that way. The people of India, the Indo-Europeans, back in the day, before they went into battle, the men had to do a firewalk the night before. And if they didn't, they weren't allowed to go to battle, which would disgrace their family. The Hawaiians, the Polynesians, the Native American Indians in America, firewalking's been around for over 1,000 years.
I wonder if there's something also primal about just fire. You know, it's the hearth and that we gather towards, and it's the source of creating food and warmth.
Sure. You nailed it. You really did, Elizabeth. Absolutely is primal. So that's what makes it so magical. And people go, you know, how is it that a simple firewalk and a board break could create that kind of change in my company? Well, that's because we let fire do what fire does. Everybody has a strong association to fire. Who hasn't ever sat around a campfire and felt the warm and fuzzies and been anchored to that experience? The warmth, the love, the nurturing. And then at the same time, fire can be pretty brutal too, right? So
sure.
And without it, we don't exist on the planet.
Right.
When you reduce it to the element and from that angle, it becomes a very, very, very powerful situation.
I think something you said earlier is so powerful too about the firewalking or the glasswalking, that when you take the first step, you don't stop. You have to keep taking the next steps. Yep. And that's a really powerful metaphor for life too, and breaking through any fears or just forward motion and what you want to get towards in life. Don't just take the one step. Keep taking more steps and move forward.
You can pretty much accomplish anything you want as long as you don't quit. That's the way you lose. When I do my keynote presentations these days, I have a picture of a gentleman behind me on the screen, and his name is Eric. And I'll say, so who here can tell me where Eric is standing? Well, he's standing at the top of Mount Everest. It's pretty obvious, right? And because he's kind of standing at the peak, he's kind of standing cockeyed, if you will. And so I'll say, so who here can tell me what's physically wrong with him? And then I'll come back and say, and by the way, Eric has climbed the 7 highest mountains on Earth. 7 continents, 7 mountains. He's climbed them all to the summit. He's an unbelievable mountain bike rider. But here's what's interesting about Eric. He's blind.
Wow.
So,
oh my goodness.
And I do that on purpose. I do that to mess with their heads, Elizabeth. So I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear your false reasonings. You can have and do pretty much anything you want in your life. If that man right there can climb the 7 highest mountains on Earth, then what do you think you could do if you really put your mind to it and you had the right mindset? You just want to start a little business, or maybe you want to get married and have kids. I mean, come on. It really comes down to, why don't people get what they want in life? Well, the bottom line is there's a story they tell themselves of why they can't. And almost 99.9% of the time, the story is not true. It's a lie. You've made it up so that you can play small. And that doesn't serve you. Anybody that's done great things has a really strong belief system, and they have really strong mindset about things. And so what do you think Eric thinks about every day? Really? He can ride a mountain bike and he's blind? What do you want to tell that guy? Go tell him your excuse. It's not going to fly.
Yeah, I see this over and over in my podcast because I interview people who have done or are doing these extraordinary, unusual, intriguing things that most people have never done. And I was drawn to this topic just because I thought, oh, it's just so interesting to me and I'll meet all these really fascinating people. And what I've discovered over time is this theme among all of you people is that you have pursued these things, and through this pursuit, you have shown dedication and passion, and you never give up, because everyone has hard times and everyone eventually had the option to give up. I interviewed an Olympic gold medalist. He didn't get there just because it was easy. He had plenty of times he could have given up, and there were plenty of injuries and walls that were hit, but he kept going. I did interview a guy who summited Mount Everest. He went twice. His first time he tried, he didn't summit, so he went the next year. People run into hard times. It's the mindset. And then I realized the reason I'm drawn to these people is because I need this message. I love this message. This is who I am too. I want to keep going and pursue my passions and my dreams. And so I think this is the key, the mindset of how you are going to approach your life. You can tell yourself whatever story you want to tell yourself, and then that is what you will believe.
I say all the time, life's not as good as it seems. Life is not as bad as it seems. Reality is somewhere in the middle. I use this a lot. Now, I didn't get into too much of my story, but I was grossly addicted to alcohol and drugs at one time of my life. And I started drinking at a very young age because my parents did. And I was adopted. And so on June 8th of 1988, I woke up that morning. I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm out. I cannot do this. I was in so much physical pain and emotional pain that the only option I saw was to put a bullet in my head, because I didn't care. I just wanted the pain to stop. I wasn't thinking, is there a heaven or a hell? I'm not thinking any of that. I could care less. All I want is the pain to stop. So I put the pistol in my mouth. Well,
literally?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure did.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was married to a woman who had 3 kids. They were my stepkids. And I thought, you know what? You pull that trigger, they're going to see the aftermath of that. And that's not pretty. You can't do that to those kids. They're good kids. You love them. No. Figure out another way to deal with your pain. And so the next thought I had was call Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, what's interesting about that, Elizabeth, is I had no idea who AA was. None. Zero. I didn't know anybody that was in AA. I'd never been to an AA meeting. I didn't know anything about AA, and yet there was the thought. And so I called them, and they sent a man to come pick me up. And that was on June 8th of 1988, and it'll be 35 years.
Remarkable. What a turnaround.
So, yes.
Fantastic.
And that's where AA and the fundamentals, the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, came together with the personal development industry. Because I was up late one night, and I had insomnia, and so my sleep patterns were all over the place. And there he is on an infomercial back in the 80s, Tony Robbins, a young, enthusiastic dude. There he was selling his personal power program. And I ended up buying the program. So I went through it, and I did what the man taught me to do. And I remember back in the day when I finished the program, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to be walking down the street somewhere, wherever, and see Tony Robbins? It'd be really cool to say, hey, Tony, hey, Dave Albin, man. Hey, I went through your program. Thank you. It worked. You changed my life. And so I went a little further than that.
Look what happened.
Look what happened, So I got to work with the man for just shy of 20 years. And,
what was that like, working so closely with him? What did you learn from him?
I learned a great deal. I get asked quite a bit, what's the number one fundamental you learned from Tony? And that is, everything in life, it comes down to we run patterns. I don't care what it is. And if you learn how patterns can serve you or not serve you, that's really the key element to life. And once you can learn to interrupt the patterns and install new belief systems and new patterns, it's really the key to life. In addition to peer group is everything. We are who we spend time with. And if you take the average 6 people that you hang around with most, and you look at their average income and you average that out, you're within 10% of that. So peer group is at everything. And I say all the time, love your family, choose your friends. And you better choose wisely, because you will become who you spent time with. When I was back out drinking and drugging, guess who I was hanging out with? Drug addicts, drug dealers, pimps, prostitutes, gang members, the whole 9 yards. And once I got to AA, I started hanging around with sober alcoholics. And so my whole life was literally handed back to me. And I believe that the two most important times in our life is the moment we were born and the moment we figure out why. So for me, I realized once I got sober that there was a divine purpose to my life and that there was going to be a calling for me. And that came by way of the Firewalk. And so now I have the honor and privilege to go to some of the biggest companies in the world. You know, the ones I really love to work with are schools, are kids.
Oh.
Give me a bunch of junior high kids or grammar school kids. Let me show them how to break a board with their bare hand. Let me take them through that experience. And I'll radically change their life. They'll never forget that. And the kids, you know, they don't get a chance to do that kind of stuff, right? They have to join like a martial arts studio to be able to break a board with their bare hands. And I can come into a school and spend an hour and have every kid in the school break the board. So I love doing philanthropic work and benevolent work.
Do you feel like sometimes when people are confronting a firewalk or a glass walk, the fear that they're feeling is about more than just the fear of the fire or the glass?
Yeah. It's normally something else. There's something else going on in their life when they get to that point. When they're standing in that fire lane, they're looking towards me. I'm looking deep into their eyes. I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of faces, and you wouldn't believe the look on their face. It's like everything in their life has come down to that moment right there. Because it's not like you're going on a trip and you're going bungee jumping. Even though that can scare you, or you're going to get on a roller coaster and deal with that. But at that moment, everything comes forward. And I get to see it on their face. And literally seconds later, boom, they cross over, they're on the other side, they did it, and they celebrate. And everything about them changes instantaneously. I mean, it's that quick. It's so cool to be able to see that. In fact, if you go Google Oprah and you watch her firewalk, you'll see that firsthand. Because Oprah's losing it. She is like questioning it. She's like, oh my gosh, I probably made a big mistake. I shouldn't be here. You know, so all that dialogue that stops us from our greatness starts playing out a role. Well, Tony takes her through a process. You know, she's running a pattern. Tony interrupts the pattern by saying, Oprah, look, what's the worst that can happen? Chill out. I'm not going to let you get hurt. And so she's like, you know what? He's right. And so she walks. Well, she loses it. Well, here's where it gets really, really super interesting. Once she firewalks and she's jumping up and down and she's celebrating, she's having a really good time. After she does that, she walks over from where the fire lane is, and the film crew goes with her, and she makes a declaration right there on camera. And she makes one of the biggest business decisions of her life right there on the spot.
What is it?
She created what was called the Next Chapter, if you remember when she started that program.
Yeah.
Yep. That you'll see her say it. She goes, this is it, you guys. This is it, people. This is the next chapter, people. And you see her. You can just see it come over. It's really cool to watch. It's phenomenal. But that's pretty typical.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do other people have those kind of self-revelations?
Yeah. There was a gentleman one time that came to one of our events, and he was told that he's not a writer. You never be a screenplay writer. You know, you're not going to break into Hollywood. It's not going to happen. Well, he came to the seminar, did his firewalking, went home and wrote Sleepless in Seattle.
My goodness.
One of the coolest moments I've had, and there's thousands of them, but one of them that stands out is there was a young man in Tampa. He was in high school. He played football, baseball, did it all. Really, really great athlete. Got hit by a drunk driver. Lost both legs. Now he's suicidal because now his identity was wrapped up in how good he was in sports. So he started running new patterns, right? Well, I guess he's contemplating suicide. One of his buddies said, hey, listen, before you do that, I know you like Tony Robbins. He's coming to town. Why don't you go to his event? And so there we are. It's midnight, and we're at the Firewalk. Everybody's out there. The drums are going. Everybody's chanting. And the next thing I know, Tony kind of stops, and he looks at me as if to say, I think we're going to see something really spectacular here in a moment. Well, I can't see the kid. It's dark out there. He's in a wheelchair. The next thing I know, here he is. I see him. And so Tony bends down to talk to him, and the kid like blows him up. He's like, no, I got this. Well, he positioned his wheelchair in front of the lane, and the next thing I saw, he threw himself forward. He had a ton of upper body strength. He landed on his hands, and he walked across the fire on his hands.
Wow.
Tony and I looked at each other and we were like, what? Are you kidding me? And with tears in our eyes. I mean, both Tony and I teared up. Because you can't see something that humanistically spectacular of what human beings are really, really capable of and it not hit you emotionally.
And the determination of this kid.
Oh my gosh, that was so cool. So sometimes all you need is a little fire lit under your you-know-what, as they used to say,
literally.
metaphorically. And this is why firewalking is such a spectacular experience, because it guarantees results. And you don't have to wait for it. You just did something so extraordinary, it helps interrupt the pattern. It helps stop telling yourself false, it's metaphorically, what's the acronym? Face everything and rise, or forget everything and run.
Oh.
Right? The acronym for fear. I'm a very, very, very grateful man, because I believe fear does not exist where gratitude is present. They can't operate the same space at the same time. So if you,
what a wonderful saying.
Right? Gratitude is the key. I've had a spectacular and an absolutely magical life. But it wasn't always like that. It came with some work, and here's what I know. Anybody can have it. It's there for the taking. You just have to be able to break through and say, you know what? I'm here for a reason. And I used to sponsor this kid in Mark Winches. I love him to death. I lost Mark. Mark used to say all the time, if you're not grateful for today, what day are you waiting for? So it's nice to be able to say that in his honor.
Yeah. Oh, I'll remember him with that. Wow. Well, thank you so much. Boy, I've learned a lot. I am really inspired, and what a wonderful image to think we can break through the boards. We can walk through our fears.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dave.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Elizabeth.